Hey, how are we feeling tonight? This side of the room's feeling great. How's the middle section doing tonight? Incredible. How about this section? All right, Chase is feeling great. Eli, too late. Too late. I love it. Hey, you know what? Before I even start, this time of year is like one of the most tired times of year. You know, you get this exciting period of time where you're coming up to Thanksgiving and it's exciting, and then you're like, yes, all the Christmas haters can be quiet because that was Christmas time, and you build up to Christmas, and then you celebrate that. You're like, okay, you're a little sad on December 26th. You're like, oh, I'm really sad right now. I have to wait another 364 days for Christmas, but you still have a little bit of hope because you're like, oh, New Year's is still coming. Okay, I don't have to be sad, and then New Year's comes and goes, and now you're like, oh, it's just cold and gray, and I'm sad and tired. All right, anyone else there? Just me? All right, me and like 4 other people get seasonal sadness. All right, just me apparently. I'm crazy. You're all normal and cool. Of course. Who's loving 2024 so far? All right, loving it? All right, who says 2024 is your year? Nobody. Who's already given up on 2024 and you're like, 2025 is going to be my year. 2024 is already busted. Wow, we've got some negative people in here. You've already given up. Cut that out. Cut that out. Listen, it's still January, so we're still talking about the new year. We're still establishing what's this year all about. And so, who's heard of New Year's resolutions before? It's got to be like all of you. Otherwise, you live in a hole. And I really hope you don't. If you do, I'm sorry about that. So you know about resolutions. Now raise your hand if you actually made like a New Year's resolution. You set a goal, at least one goal you set for yourself. All right, anyone want to share what their goal was? Nobody. Win the Fortnite World Championship or whatever? All right, sounds good, dude. We'll be watching. All right, yeah, so every year, Emily and I love to set goals. We set goals individually. We set goals as a couple, things that we want to accomplish. And Emily knows, and my family know, and those that know me know, I tend to have pretty unrealistic schemes. My family calls me a schemer because basically the entire year I'll be like, you know, it'd be really cool if we do this. And it's like the most, I can't even think of an example because it's just too crazy. What's that? Hot tub's a realistic goal. Maybe not. Anyways. 2020. That's a 2025. Yeah, not this year. No. No. I love like dreaming big. I love thinking of like, man, it'd be so cool. Like Emily and I will be talking about the next house we want to buy, and I'm like, all right, cool. We're gonna save this much, and we're gonna get this house. And she's like, that's not possible. And I'm like, well, we're gonna make it happen. But we set goals, and for myself, I set goals spiritually first and foremost, all right, because our goals in our faith, that's the most important, all right? And what is that goal? Quite simply, I want greater closeness with Christ this year. You know, we talk about a lot of times saying, oh, I want to seek the face of God. No, I really do want to see the face of Jesus. You hear people having dreams and visions where the Lord visits them and they're like, I saw his face. Like, I'm like literally praying. I'm like, the Bible talks about you ask not, so you have not. I'm like, God, I want to see your face. I want to know you intimately. I want to be closer to you this year. All right? You set goals physically. All right? I want to, you know, no one wanted to share their goals. I'll just share mine. I want to drop 20 pounds, okay? Come on. Come on. I used to be a lot just better shape than I am now. So I used to be chiseled. Now I'm less chiseled. Okay? So anyways, physical goals. You've got relationship goals, you know, goals for our marriage, things we want to be better at. We've got financial goals, career goals. It's all great to set goals. But one thing's interesting. Stats show the vast majority of people that set New Year's resolutions will quit them in the first 1 to 3 months. All right, so we are quitters. As a population in general, We are quitters. So much so that there are 3 days of the year that are actually named after quitting New Year's, all right? January 17th is titled Ditch New Year's Resolution Day. The second Friday of January is also called Quitter's Day. And June 1st is New Year's Resolution Recommitment Day. So we're just wishy-washy people. We know what we want, but we're not willing to pay the price. All right, if you've seen Star Wars, it's like, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. All right, that's where we're at in life. Why are we so bad at finishing what we start? Anyone know why we're so bad at finishing what we start? Because we lack discipline. We lack discipline. What's happening? You guessed discipline? Were you at pre-service prayer? Classic. Anyways, great job. Yeah, you know what? If you come to pre-service prayer, guess what? You already get to know what we're preaching about. Wow. Just another reason to come to pre-service prayer, baby. Get here 6:30 every Wednesday. Not 6:30, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Don't listen to me. Talk to Pastor Payton. Anyways, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but we lack discipline. We live in a culture, we've talked about this before, we live in a culture that is all about instant gratification. All right, if we have a craving, we go and we get that food. That's why one of my New Year's resolutions is to cut some weight, because I'm horrible about saying no to cravings. All right, we say we want to accomplish a goal, and we start out and we start doing things because it's exciting, and once the feeling goes away, once the mountaintop moment goes away, and suddenly it's like actual sacrifice, we're like, I'm just gonna call it. We lack the discipline because once the fun is gone, once the newness is gone, it's discipline that carries you through the finish line. Proverbs 21 verse 5 says this, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Good planning and hard work, otherwise good planning and discipline, are what get you to prosperity, are what help you get to success. It's not just something that's handed to you. And one thing that we kind of get misconstrued with our faith is we tend to hear, oh, Jesus paid the price for me so I can have a relationship with God. And a lot of us kind of treat our faith like God already did everything, so we don't have to do anything. That's like saying, Emily and I got married, the ring's on her finger, so I'm done, we're married. Well, that's not how it works. You're not done. There's still work to do. There's still discipline to have. Payne and I, we've told you all the time, we grew up together, middle school, high school, and we were on the same wrestling team. And we, one year, I don't remember if it was our freshman or sophomore year, but we had these two Chinese exchange students named Bai Naifu and Terry Wu. Terry Wu and Bai Naifu, okay? Terry Wu and Bai Naifu spoke zero English, zero. I don't even think they knew how to say hello. I never heard them say one English word. And they would come, I don't know how they got on the wrestling team, and we're standing there in practice, and we had some coaches that were kind of fireballs. They were kind of angry people. And so what would happen is they would start making us do sprints. And they'd be yelling at us, and they'd be saying, if anyone stops sprinting, we're restarting. Well, Terry Wu and Bai Naifu had no idea what the heck that guy was saying. And even though the coaches knew they spoke no English, Terry Wu and Bai Naifu would start rolling on the ground laughing. They were too tired. They got so tired they just start laughing. And the fact that they laughed made our coaches so mad that all the time, practice after practice, we would do like 4 times the amount of sprints we were ever supposed to because of Terry Wu and Bai Naifu. Terry Wu and Bai Naifu had no discipline whatsoever, not a competitive bone in their body. They said, I didn't even need the coach to tell me not to stop sprinting. I was like, I won't be the guy that stops sprinting. I will not stop. I'm not going to be that guy. And Terry Wu and Bai Naifu did not care. And we paid the price. We paid bitterly for that price, and they just laughed the whole time. This is what happens, though, when we lack discipline. We're not just dragging ourselves down, we're dragging those around us down. The things that God's calling us to do, by us not having discipline with ourselves, we're actually failing ourselves and failing those that God is asking us to serve. We've kind of been drilling this idea home for a while now, but we've got to really accept not only is our relationship with God our responsibility, but it's not just about us. Our faith is meant to impact all those around us. And if God placed someone in your life, but you're not disciplined enough to pursue him, disciplined enough to grow so that you're prepared for conversations, prepared for moments, we're failing people around us too. Now, who would agree, whether you sat down and set goals for 2024, who would agree it would be a goal of yours this year, 2024, to get closer to God this year? Who would agree that I want that for 2024? Can I tell you something? The difference between you getting closer to God or not is if you're going to be disciplined in your approach to pursuing him. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go on through that. But again, we live in a time of instant gratification. We cannot seek to constantly live our faith in these mountaintop moments. Let's look at Proverbs 25, verse 28. It says, "A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls." All right, now I want to explain the difference real quick between self-control and discipline. All right, right now we're going to talk about some different spiritual disciplines. But self-control is more about what you say no to. All right, there's a tempting meal. Absolutely not. I'm not going to eat that. This person wants me to go do this thing. Self-control, no, I'm not going to do that. Discipline is about what you're going to say yes to, despite what you're feeling. So self-control, you're saying no to your feelings, saying no to something ungodly, saying no to something that gets in the way of what God wants. Discipline is saying, I'm going to pursue God. I'm going to practice the right things when I'm not feeling like it. It's about what you are going to do. So tonight, we're going to talk about spiritual disciplines, all right? We're not focusing on physical disciplines of getting healthier. We're talking about biblical spiritual disciplines that will help you grow in depth in your relationship with God and achieve that goal that we just talked about. Now, pastors and theologians, depending on who you ask, they may list 15 or more spiritual disciplines that you can practice. Now, some of those are a little debatable on if they're necessarily biblical. Some of them are like, is that really a discipline or just something we do all the time or occasionally? I want to give you real quick, and this is a good night, students, this is a good night to take notes. If you don't have a notebook, bring a notebook, but pull out your phone, open your notes. This is a great night to take notes, and it'll probably be a great month to take notes. That being said, there are 10 spiritual disciplines that are not up for debate. These are spiritual disciplines that are pretty dang widely accepted as things that benefit us. So I'm going to give you all 10, and then I'm going to go and explain 4 of them tonight. So we'll explain the other 6 over the course of this month, be that myself or Pastor Payton. But the 10 spiritual disciplines are these. 1 is silence. Next is solitude, prayer, fasting, study, meditation, Sabbath, service, confession, worship. You guys get that? All right, we'll start over. 1 is silence. 2 is solitude. 3 is prayer. 4 is fasting. We still good? 5 is study. 6 is meditation. 7 is Sabbath. 8 is service. Do I need to spell Sabbath? Okay, I heard some whispers. 9 is confession, and 10 is worship. All right, are we good? Do we have them? All right. Now let me just set the expectation. While we're talking about discipline, and while I'm talking about living for God despite a lack of mountaintop moments, that sort of thing. Tonight is kind of a teaching/coaching night. I'm not looking to get your emotions at a certain level. If you encounter the Spirit of God tonight, I love that. You probably will. But tonight, I really want you to have a sober approach to these goals. The last thing I would want is for you to start them and get all get all hype and high on it, and then say, okay, well, not the same as that moment on Wednesday, so I give up. Okay? So those are the 10. Now, the 4 that we're going to go over tonight are the first 4. Silence, solitude, prayer, and fasting. All right, these are 4 spiritual disciplines that really, they all work together. If you are bad at one of them, you're probably struggling in all of them. All right, you actually kind of need these 4 disciplines together to be successful in practicing them. So silence, solitude, prayer, and fasting is what we're talking about tonight. Hebrews 12, verse 11 says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. Look at your neighbor and say, no discipline. No discipline. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. Trained. Listen, our faith and our relationship with God is similar to that of a muscle. We actually have to train. We actually have to develop. And it takes discipline to do that. But the harvest of training this, the harvest of is the righteous living. It's becoming like Christ. Some of you have been struggling with the same sin, the same depression, the same things you've been struggling with for so long. And you're wondering why? It could be because we have not been disciplined in these different areas. You want the harvest of being Christ-like. It's going to take some work. So, they're meant to lead us to a place of spiritual maturity. What is a spiritually immature person? A spiritually immature person is a person that says no to God and says yes to their flesh and says yes to the world around them, always. It's not that you can't get that treat. It's not that you can't get that McDonald's, ever. Okay? But it's this. A spiritually mature person will say yes to God every single time. A spiritually mature person, before they make a decision, will consult God every single time. And what we lose track of is we wait to do this when there's big decisions. We wait to do this until there's dire situations. Then we want to consult God. And that's the same thing as living for mountaintop moments. We should be having a relationship when there's nothing happening. That's real life. That's real relationship. So, disciplines that we're going to start with silence and solitude. Now, these sound very similar, silence and solitude. They are not. One thing that is similar about silence and solitude, though, is they are both about listening. Silence and solitude. These are disciplines, spiritual disciplines that are about listening. Let's look at how Jesus examples these for us. In Luke chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray." Now, when you look at the original word used here in the Greek for desolate, it means devoid of all life. Jesus would go to a place where there was nobody around, no one to ask him things, no one that he needed to talk to. He would go to be completely and utterly alone. In other words, solitude with the Heavenly Father. Again, in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it says, "And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed." This is speaking of Jesus. Now, where are my morning people at? Not here. All right? Where are my late night owls at? Tommy, I know you're a late night guy. Come on. Hey, you know what? I've never been a morning person, ever. I never will be. In fact, I actually learned in like the last 2 years, I was always like, man, how do I change this? It's actually ingrained in you. Did you know this scientifically? It's actually ingrained in you, whether you're a morning person or a night person. And you can force yourself to have routine and force yourself, but there's actually a tendency that you have. And so I'm like, I feel better. I feel so much better about myself. However, when you grow up, you have no choice. Get up in the morning. So we see this example, though, in Jesus. We're looking at these moments of him getting alone in solitude. But what I want you to notice is from this second verse is when. Very early in the morning. Now, I think it's a little bit less important that it was still dark. I think that emphasizes how early he was up. But there's something to be said about how we start our day. Do we start our day by looking through our phone, making sure we're caught up on social media, making sure that our plans are going to be what happens for the day? Or are we starting at the right source? All right? Listen, there's a big difference I notice in my day. If I start my day with prayer and I start my day in the presence of God, my perspective is in a much, much better place. And I find that my day goes so much better. But if I start my day by looking at my schedule, looking at what I have to do, I'm a lot more negative. I'm a lot less excited to see what the day has to bring. We should be starting our day with moments alone in solitude with the Father. Matthew chapter 14, verse 23 says, "And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray, and when evening came, he was there alone." Once again, this is Jesus going to be alone. He was going to have solitude up on that mountain. But what I want you to notice about this portion is that he was there for a very extended period of time. Not only is there power in getting alone with the Father, there's actually power in periodically taking moments of prolonged solitude with God. That's part of the reason why retreats and camps tend to be so powerful for people. Because you took that time to go and be with God. Now, those are filled with loud worship, event speakers, lots of people all over the place. But do you realize, and we've told you before, it's not the fact that all those things are there. It's the fact that you were intentional and had faith to go take that time with God. You can have mountaintop moments going and being alone with just you and God. But it takes faith, and it's a discipline. That's solitude. Let me speak to silence. Silence is as it sounds. There is not noise. Do you want to know what I find interesting about when people come to me and say, "God's not speaking to me, I don't hear anything"? Now, if we're the bride of Christ, as the Bible describes us, then I'll continue to use my marriage as an example. Emily and I don't have, no two people have enough to talk about that they will talk for the entirety of their time together forever. Do you guys think that when we get to heaven, we're going to be literally vocalizing speech back and forth with God forever? I truly don't think so. We will be worshiping, but there's going to be moments of presence, moments of no one speaking. What if you're saying, "I want to spend time with God"? What if he's not trying to say anything? And what if there's nothing you need to say? What if we just need to sit and enjoy his presence? There's something, we say we want intimacy and depth of relationship with God. There's something so deeply intimate of getting to a point where you don't feel like you have to say anything. You're just together. There's silence. But that silence is filled with intimacy and joy and relationship. Sometimes in our relationship with God, we don't need to speak. We just need to embrace that presence. At the same time, some of us are so busy talking that we're not hearing God. And some of us tend to over-romanticize our time with God. Was that harsh? Okay. I'm going to say it how it is. We over-romanticize our time with God. What am I saying? I have known many Christians, and I'm not referring to anyone in this room that I know of, but I've known many Christians or people that call themselves Christians that can't spend time with God unless there's worship music, a notebook with fancy drawings all over their page. And how do I know there's fancy drawings all over their page? Because they posted it on Instagram with their coffee and a song in the background so that everyone knows that they spent their time with the Lord today. It's like we can't spend time, and if you've done that, that's okay. If it's done with the right heart to encourage people to do their devotions, that's great. I just know there's people that aren't that way, okay? And here's the deal. We should not be practicing our faith to fuel our pride. I shared this on Sunday when I preached a little while ago. Faith is not meant to fuel our pride. And if it is fueling your pride, it's not faith, it's a performance. That is not pleasing to God. We're not here so people can think we're better or like us or think we're cool or think we're holy. We're here to please God with the faith that we have and the way that we live. Now, here's the problem. When we have our moments that we're trying to spend with God, and we have to set this perfect tone, this perfect atmosphere, got to have my worship music on, Got to have my right notebook with my fancy pens and my drawings. Got to post it on Instagram. Then what you're pursuing is not God. You're pursuing a mountaintop moment. You're pursuing an emotional high, like a moment you maybe experienced in the past. Tell me, the people that we see in the Bible who performed amazing things in the name of Jesus, the people in the Old Testament, like Abraham, who God called his friend, did those people have worship music when they were spending time with God? The answer is no. They had no music in their ear. What they did do is they went and prayed in solitude when no one was watching. They didn't publicize it. It was all about reverence and being with God. They didn't need an atmosphere. We need to get out of this idea that there must be a perfect atmosphere for the right moment with God. So why is this a discipline? It's a silence. This is a spiritual discipline because in our day and age, we need that noise. There's so much distraction in our lives with our phones, with social media, with the news, with people texting us, all this stuff to where it's so hard. Silence is the discipline of saying no to all of those things, turning off every bit of noise, putting away anything that might bring noise, and saying, God, I'm sitting here with just you. I don't need anything to make that better because you're the one that's good. It's a discipline. When was the last time, just to yourself, when was the last time that you had a prayer time, you had time with God, that there was nothing, just silence and solitude? I'd bet there's very few people in this room that could say that they've done that anytime recently. But that's how we see the Bible. That's how we see people in the Bible spending time with God. But we don't like to worship that. We don't like to follow after that example. And so my challenge for these two disciplines before I move on to the last two for the day, my challenge for you, intentionally spend time in silence with the Lord. Turn everything off. Throw your phone in a different room if you have to. Don't bring any earbuds in. Turn your speaker off. It's going to feel weird probably at first, but that's what makes it a discipline. Right? Because it doesn't feel good right away. It doesn't feel like it's right. But when you accomplish it, when you do it consistently, I promise you will see the fruit of it. Do not wait to spend your time with God at church. Do not listen to me, hear this, because I know for a fact, I was a youth student. I studied youth ministry. I know for a fact, I hate to say it as one of your pastors, but many people in this room, your primary spiritual food is nights like this and maybe Sundays. Maybe, if you go. Do you realize that this is supposed to be supplemental? What am I saying? This is not your primary spiritual food. At least it's not supposed to be. And if it is, that's probably why you're struggling. Because 2 days a week is not enough. Yesterday's meal isn't going to keep you full today. Now add several days to that. Wonder why you're starving to hear from God? Because you're still trying to live off of last summer camp. You're starving. Can I tell you something too? No pastor is ever going to get up here and say something that's going to motivate you enough. No pastor is ever going to get up here and seal the deal for you. I wish I could. I wish Pastor Peyton and I could preach so well that it just made you do something. But God himself is not forcing you to live for him. So how could Peyton or I do that? We can't. And to be honest, I don't really want to. Because if I do it for you, it means you didn't want it. You got to want it. Like our wrestling coaches. You got to want it. Do you want it or not? I don't know what you just said. All right. Oh, you say Terry Wu? Cool. All right, man. We're going to move on to prayer and fasting. Now, who knows what we're doing as a church? Prayer and fasting. Oh my gosh, what timing. It's like I purposely chose this because we're doing prayer and fasting. That's crazy. What? Was it God? Was it my brain? Maybe both. 21 days of prayer and fasting. This is something that churches do all over the country. Sometimes it looks a little different depending on the church. But we know that God loves when we give him our firsts. All right, we talk about that a lot with our tithe, with our finances, and that's a different subject. But God loves when we give him our best. Do you guys believe that God is worthy of your best? The answer should be pretty clearly yes. So the idea of doing 21 days of prayer and fasting is kind of cool because it's saying, God, I'm giving you the beginning of my year. I'm starting my year making it about you and what you want. I've got desires, I've got plans, I've got ambitions, but I'm going to give up something and I'm going to make it about you. 21 days of prayer and fasting. Now, prayer and fasting, these are two disciplines that many of us have heard about, especially prayer, and yet we're horrible at them. Okay? So we're going to talk about them a little bit. We'll definitely be preaching about prayer. Prayer, you could do a whole series on prayer. You could do multiple messages on all these things. But I'm giving you a glimpse. So these are two disciplines that also go hand in hand, prayer and fasting. If you're bad at one, you're probably bad at the other. Because really, you can't fast without prayer. It's quite literally it's not fasting. It's not godly spiritual fasting, as what the Bible describes. So before I even talk about prayer, I want to just talk a little bit about fasting. Raise your hand if you know what fasting is. A good amount. Wonderful. Fasting shows God that you are not dependent on your physical needs, on worldly things. You are more dependent and reliant on his spiritual power and authority. So some people, a lot of times it's food. A lot of times people will give up a meal a day. They'll give up a meal. They'll stop eating for a few days, for a week. Imagine. All right, who's ever stopped eating for a whole week? Just water. Anyone? Few people. I love it. I love it. It's actually healthy for you, believe it or not. Now, one thing that people don't understand is that fasting not only shows God that we are trusting in him, but fasting also reveals the things that have been controlling us. It brings things to the surface that we maybe have buried with things of this world. So, for example, if I've gained 40 pounds, hypothetically, if I've gained 40 pounds since being married, all right, we've been married for almost 5 years, and 40 pounds potentially added on, it could be that rather than looking to God for peace, maybe I made food a source of comfort. Maybe. And at that point, you say you started fasting 3 days ago, you might realize really quick, wow, food has a hold on my life. I am being controlled by my diet. Now, you might fast Instagram. All right, I also I'm fasting food in a certain type of fasting, and I'm fasting social media. I deleted TikTok. I deleted Instagram. The two things that if I'm doing nothing, I will open my phone and I will go to one of those two things probably. And my mind will tune out and I will gain nothing except a couple laughs and some conspiracy. So I deleted those things, and actually today I opened my phone, and I kid you not, I opened my phone and I click exactly where Instagram used to be. And I go to a random app. I don't even because your app's all rearranged. So I'm like, what did I just open? I'm like, that's not Instagram. But I'm fasting it, and it's like you realize so fast, like, wow, my time was under the control of these silly distractions. And fasting is when you're fasting food, and you're like, dang, this is normally the time I'd go get a snack. Now I'm going to pray instead. Oh, this is normally the time where I'd mindlessly scroll on TikTok. Now I'm going to pray instead. See, fasting isn't just getting healthy mentally. It's not just dieting and making your physical body healthy. It's saying, God, not only am I acknowledging that I need you more than anything else, but I want to get rid of the things that are distracting me from you. So expose those things. So what is it? In a short term, fasting is feasting for your soul. There's some little Twitter thing for you. Fasting is feasting for your soul. Another benefit of fasting, one, it takes humility to fast, right? It takes humility to say, God, I need you, and then to do something about it. Fasting requires humility, but what it also does is it actually leads to greater humility. Because while in the beginning you acknowledged, I need God, so I'm going to fast, then you start getting hungry, and you remember, wow, I really do need God. And then you start realizing how much you've been spending time on stupid stuff, and you're like, wow, God, I've been so bad. Like, and it is a humbling thing. It puts God back in his rightful place. Now, there's a passage, Pastor Phil referenced it on Sunday. If you were there, I'm going to use it as well. In Mark, there's a story. There's a couple disciples who are trying to exorcise a demon out of a boy. Okay, it was a possessed boy, and they tried to cast this demon out, and they were not able to. Jesus comes along, quite easily sends the demon out. He frees this boy. And the disciples are like, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we cast this spirit out of the boy? Jesus says this in Mark 9, verse 29. So he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. Now, this is an example in the Bible of spiritual warfare. But realize this, there are many things in life that only come by prayer and fasting. So you're saying, man, God, I'm asking for you to save my family. You might need to pray and fast. God, I'm asking for you to save my school. You might need to pray and fast. God, I'm asking for my family member to receive healing. You might need to pray and fast. God, I'm looking for direction for my future. Why haven't I gotten any direction? You might need to pray and fast. So let me be so clear. Fasting is not really an optional discipline. Like you might be sitting here thinking, oh, that's probably for some people who are like really far along. No. Jesus said some things will only happen by prayer and fasting. So if you've never fasted and you're like, well, I just don't feel like I'm growing, maybe do something you haven't done before. Maybe get out of your comfort zone. Fast. You're like, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know how to fast. Come talk to Pastor Payton and I, or one of your youth leaders, and we will tell you all the different ways you can fast. If you're new, I would not suggest not eating for 21 days. Okay? There's something to be said about goals. Psychologically speaking, we get excited and we create these monster goals. That's like me going to the gym and saying, I want to drop all 40 of the pounds I gained this week. I would die. It's literally not possible. Psychologically speaking, if you want to achieve discipline and grow, it's small steps forward, and you build into bigger steps. That is how it works. Psychologically, that is literally proven. That's how you build discipline. Small steps. But we despise small beginnings. We want the end result. That's why it's discipline. Small steps every day. And so maybe if you want to start practicing fasting, maybe you need to skip a meal once a week. One time a week, you skip lunch and say, I'm going to pray for 30 minutes. One time a week. You are all capable of that. I promise you. The thing with fasting as well, it's like I said earlier, we wait for dire situations. We wait till we need something huge to fast. Really, fasting should probably be a regular practice. We should actually probably be fasting when there's nothing major on our horizon that we feel like we need. In other words, there are people that fast a weekend a month. There are people that fast a day a week, a meal a week. Either way, fasting really should be a regular part of your faith. So don't wait. Don't wait. Now, our last verse for today, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17 and 18 says, never stop praying. Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. Go ahead and stand to your feet. Everybody. Never stop praying. Now, I don't think that statement leaves really any room for question. Some of us are here, and the last time you prayed might have been weeks ago, might have been months ago. Not counting the times where your pastor was praying for you. It might have been a long time since you sat and prayed. Let alone the first disciplines we talked about of silence and solitude. These are disciplines that we must have if we want to reach a point of closeness with God. Here's the deal. Prayer, fasting might be once a week, fasting might be once a month. It's really what God lays on your heart. Prayer is a daily discipline. There's no question about it. All over the Bible, prayer is a daily discipline. You look at Daniel in the lion's den. Who knows the story of Daniel in the lion's den? Anyone that grew up in church knows that story. I didn't grow up in church. I happen to know the story. Okay? Daniel is under threat. His life is under threat because there's a king, Nebuchadnezzar, who wants to kill anyone who doesn't bow down to him. What does Daniel do? It says that he prays 3 times a day anyways. And we have what's called the Daniel fast. It's where you cut out certain food groups and you're fasting in that way. What am I saying? I'm saying Daniel's a great model of when do I pray? How do I pray? Sometimes you hear messages like this and you're like, cool, how much? Listen, if you don't pray at all, don't try and start to pray for 30 minutes. Pray for like 2 minutes. Small, achievable goals. But one thing I challenge you with this is this. If you can't reach the never stop praying mark, maybe you should go to the Daniel mark and pray 3 times a day. In the morning, to start your day. In the middle of the day, check in, recenter. And at night, the last thing you think about should be the most important thing to you, God. You pray 3 times a day. That is Pastor Logan's minimum challenge for you tonight. That every single one of you would go forward from this place praying 3 times a day. Be that for a minute, be that for 30 minutes. Whatever you're capable of, whatever you feel you need, but you have to start somewhere. Another thing we notice about how God likes to operate. Jesus sent his disciples out in pairs. When Jesus would send his disciples out, he'd send them out in pairs. There's something powerful and special when we try to do our relationship with God together. Try to operate in our callings together. The same goes for prayer. The Bible says, where 2 or more gather in my name, there I am with them. Now, many love that verse. Many of you know that verse. But how often do you find yourself actually praying physically with a person? Probably not super often for some of you. A good practice, because tonight's all about being practical and disciplined and real. A good practice is to have a prayer partner. That is a person that you are not only praying for them, but you are praying with them. You might text them every day saying, hey, I prayed this for you today. Hey, God spoke this to me for you today. You know the best messages are? When someone messages you and says, hey, I actually thought of you today, and I prayed for you, and I felt like God wanted me to tell you this. There's really not a lot of messages that are better than that. That's what we got to be doing that for each other. Being prayer partners, walking together. The last thing I'll share is this. Multitasking with your time with God, multitasking is great in the sense that, I've asked people, when do you pray? When's your typical prayer time? I pray in the car while I'm driving to school. I pray in the car while I'm driving to work. I pray in the car I pray while I'm cleaning. I pray while I work out. Those are all great, truly. But if there's one thing I learned, being married, I could sit and have a conversation with Emily while I'm playing Call of Duty and she's watching a show. But it's not the same as if we were sitting face to face, totally, utterly focused on each other. So don't eliminate your multitasking, I'm going to drive and pray. You don't have to eliminate that. But the idea of silence and solitude is that there is no people and there are no distractions. And the idea of that with prayer and fasting is that there's a consistent daily rhythm of I will pray 3 times. I will pray 3 times, and I will fast at this frequency. You want to experience God like never before. You want this to be the year where you hear from God in a new way, where you see his face. It is discipline. It starts with discipline. Let me explain this to you so quickly. There's a difference between earned and effort. You do not have to earn your salvation. Jesus earned your salvation. But your salvation requires effort, as any relationship requires effort. How could your salvation cost God everything and cost you nothing? It makes no sense. Your faith will cost you something. You will have to say no to things that feel good. You'll have to say no to things that are comfortable. You'll have to make changes in your life. But God will bless that, and you will see the fruit of that. You guys believe that tonight? I have a challenge for you tonight before you leave. One last challenge. What I want you to do is to find one person to be your prayer partner, to be praying for you, to be texting you. You might say, I'm new here, I don't know anybody. You might say, I'm an introvert, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't like people. It's a different issue. But the Bible doesn't discriminate. God doesn't say, if you're an extrovert, make sure you pray with someone. He says, we need to pray with people. So I'm sorry, but if you're an introvert, I don't care. You need to be doing this. So, I mean that so lovingly. So, if you can't find a person, find a youth leader. Youth leaders, if you end up with 3 people, be a youth leader and get their phone numbers and be texting them and praying for them. That's why we're here. So, what I want you to do is I'm going to give you some time now. We've got about 15 minutes. I want you to find a person, establish them as your prayer partner, and then I want you to commit to each other and say, this is the discipline I need to work on. Maybe it's all 4 disciplines we talked about tonight, but I want you to tell someone, I need to get better at this. And then I want you to pray for each other. All right? Sound good?
Come sound with a rude boy ting.